We talk about it a lot off mic. Age is happening to me. It's happening.
Oh,
After
pobrecito.
after Chicago, my body was like, okay, that's fine. My legs were a little bit sore, but my body's like, okay, but that's fine, but you need to sit down. After this weekend in New York, I was in bed. Like my body was just done. I can feel it happening. I feel it coming.
There's more coming. Yeah.
There's more than just my body feeling fatigued after walking a few blocks a few days.
Just wait until you pull a muscle in your back with a sneeze. Just wait. It's going to happen.
What I really worry about is age affecting the old, but hopefully that won't come. But this isn't that sort of podcast. But anyway, I'm still feeling the fatigue of the weekend of New York.
Okay,
but I'm so glad to have been there. And yeah,
but let's unpack that just for a few seconds.
Sure.
Though. How does that make you feel mentally? How did it land hard? Was it eye-opening?
Well, as I was just speaking to, I hope it continues to land hard forever and ever. Okay, no, but for real,
Ooh.
I don't know. I feel pride in getting to an age where I can feel that so many people didn't make it. And I know I'm not trying to give Miss America here, but a lot of folks didn't make it because of, societal things. COVID and killed 700,000 of us, So if I'm getting to the age where I'm not the youngest one in the room, I'm feeling a little achy after a couple days. Hey,
Yeah.
maybe I should be thankful.
Well, I've got a nice Chase lounge up here on the porch for you whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, good. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So I know that a lot of folks are gonna, come in today to hear my fire shut up in my bones reaction. What I was thinking about as I was in the hotel in New York last night, I told you I stopped. I wanted, I was trying to be cute and went and got some New York pizza on my way back to the hotel. And let me tell you, there was a fire shut up in my stomach. I mean, you can't even eat the same way as you get older. Is that also a part of it too?
Welcome.
Your body just don't process the foods the same?
I used to eat whatever I wanted in whatever portion at whatever time of day. And now I got to look at what time it is before I decide when I'm going to eat what.
Because you can't lay down on a full stomach or something like that.
I have slept sitting up.
I mean, I definitely know the heartburn struggle. Anyway, we'll whoa about getting older off mic. All right, so for this week's downbeat, Jonathan Gibbs, I hope you're listening. I'm thinking about you as I do this. For this week's downbeat, we're gonna go down to Memphis, and we're gonna go to a church where a woman named Karen Phillips gave her testimony and really gave it up and offered a pure and perfect example of the church praise break. We're starting with this because one of the things I'm going to talk about in reference to Fire Shut Up in My Bones is the idea that an orchestra, even the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, may not be the best instrument to put forward the sounds of Blackness and Black culture and Black experience. So we're going to listen to Karen Phillips tell her story and the music that responds to her story. Let's take a listen.
I was robbed at gunpoint. The man came on my side and one came on my daughter's side. Put the gun in my side, say, get out the car. And I was getting ready to get out, and I had my pocketbook. He said, leave that with me. Then he told me to stop. But the Lord said, keep walking.
Amen.
One man said, you were so cool and so smooth. I said, but I obey God. I said, Megan, come on, keep walking. But you know, Bishop, I'm glad in my soul. Because it's like the choir sing, I'm still alive.
That make me want to dance. And look at the footwork. Look at her footwork. Anyway.
No, everybody's feeling it.
Amen.
Everybody's
Praise the
feeling
Lord.
it.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of people, that's what, Black communities, Black churches will refer to as a praise break. Okay. First and foremost, what do you hear? What do you see in this moment? We have a woman who was talking about how she was robbed and almost got killed and the joy of having lived through it. What do you feel from watching that?
Well, the whole video is just full of elation.
Yeah.
And you can tell that everybody there feels comfortable in the space. And I think that's a big piece of it.
That is a
you talk
huge
about
piece of
you
it.
talk about being in community.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can get any more community than what you're seeing in this video.
Yeah. And then on top of the jubilant spirit, you know, there are all sorts of other things. The German word Gesamtkunstwerk is coming to mind. We have the space, we have the choir, and the instrument sounding so phenomenal. We have folks dressed up. Did you see Sister Phillips's outfit?
There was some fascinating hats.
The hats.
Yeah.
Yes. A long, strong history in the Black church. Now, would you expect, as I was alluding to, would you expect a Western all-white orchestra, even the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, to be able to successfully and with cultural sensitivity, but also realness, recreate that sound? Is that something
Wow.
that you think is even possible or close to possible?
I don't want to sound negative, but if they're going to get close to that, it's going to take some work.
Period. And there's nothing wrong with saying that.
Right,
it's just cultural music.
Sure. They can approximate it probably.
Right. But it's never going to be that. Okay. Right. There was a praise break scene in Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and this video was the first thing I thought about as I was sitting in the hall in the opera house watching that. Like, oh, I don't know if this orchestra can actually do that. So I mean, I think that's an important thing to name.
I wish that I felt as strongly about something as she does in this video.
Maybe you will. Maybe when that lucky lady comes into your life, you're gonna have to go to church and give it up. Look, okay, so with that was my first question, you know, the expectations of a Western all-white orchestra to be able to do that. Do you consider this podcast the type of show that can speak to the intersection of classical music, cultural music, and its intersections? Is this that show?
Half of it can.
Well, we're gonna take that 50 and round up to 100.
All right, cool.
Let's get to it. I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is TRILLOQUY. Thank you so much for being here, returning listeners. Thank you for returning and making this podcast an important and integral part of the arts ecosystem, especially the part of the arts ecosystem that's trying to break down the status quo of it all and decolonize what we call classical music, all of the conversations around it and everything else. To new listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. This is a podcast where we take the phrase classical music, we put it next to the rest of the world, and we just make it all relevant. I've constantly tried to think of different ways to describe this show, but there's some things in the news, some things in the world that specifically and directly deal with music, some things that don't. We take it all and put classical music, so-called classical music, next to that in an effort to challenge the status quo of it all.
In particular, in the second movement, you never know what music's going to come in.
Exactly. And so as you're listening, again, to new listeners, as you're listening to the music that we use to transition, and then especially the conversations that we engage in proximity to this genre, to this so-called genre, it's all toward just decolonizing it and reframing what we mean by that phrase. So thank you so much for checking us out. You can find more information on the TRILLOQUY podcast at TRILLOQUY.org. You can also donate there and find out how you can be a part of this project and this mission. Support for TRILLOQUY, in addition to your support, comes from the Shuttleworth Foundation. The Shuttleworth Foundation funds individuals who are unafraid to reimagine the world and the way we live in it. More information on the Shuttleworth Foundation at shuttleworthfoundation.org. I'm very excited to finally get to announce another supporter of the podcast. I was the recipient, one of 10 recipients of a very generous grant from Springboard for the Arts. I want to give Springboard for the Arts an applause for all of the incredible work they're doing here in Minnesota. The mission of Springboard for the Arts is to support artists with the tools to make a living and a life and to build just and equitable communities full of meaning, joy, and connection. Thank you so much to Springboard for the Arts for your support. You can find more information on Springboard for the Arts at springboardforthearts.org. And finally, I have to send a huge thank you to the American Composers Forum for being a sponsor for my trip to New York to see Fire Shut Up in My Bones and all of the other incredible performances that I saw there. If you're unfamiliar with the American Composers Forum, their mission, our mission, I will say, as a board member there, is to support and advocate for individuals and groups creating music today by demonstrating the vitality and relevance of their art. More information on the American Composers Forum at composersforum.org. Lots of institutional support, lots of individual support. It makes me feel like this movement is building some momentum, and we might actually do something in this art form of so-called classical music. Really, really, really exciting.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into movement one. All right, Scott. So as we check our accidentals here in movement one, I have to start with a natural. I need to correct something that I said a couple of weeks ago. So when we were talking about Haiti and all of the things that were going on there and folks trying to seek asylum here in the United States, we used some of the music, a string quartet by Haitian-born composer Rudy Perrault, or at least culturally Haitian. He comes from Haitian descent. I'm not sure if he was born there, but he's very much a Haitian composer. I described him maybe out of habit as the late Rudy Perrault. Well, he is very much alive. Rudy Perrault, not only alive, but here in the state. I done killed a man in Minnesota.
Do people just die when I name them?
Perrault is a director of orchestra and a professor of music at the University of Minnesota in Duluth. So, and it does say born in Port-au-Prince. So, born in Haiti. So, shout out and thank you to Rudy Perrault for all of your incredible work and your music. I didn't mean to kill you there.
I'm sure that he's glad to hear that he's still alive and well.
Right. And a huge thank you to Christine Gangelhoff for putting that on my radar, because they're friends, and she's in the academic mix. So just wanted to make sure I named that and let everyone know that this incredible composer is alive. But while I'm thinking about the island nations, the Caribbean, and all of those sorts of things, I wanted to quickly bring something up. So something that Christine put on my radar was a story from down in the Bahamas. I'm reading here from ewnews.com. The headline is Archangel Michael, Catalyst or Just More Chaos? In Christianity, the Archangel Michael is depicted as a great captain and warrior protecting the children of Israel from the forces of evil. And it goes on into the other, biblical references there. Well, they juxtapose that story and that idea with a man in the Bahamas who refers to himself as the Archangel Michael. He went to the government building, one of the main government buildings down in Nassau in the Bahamas, with his sledgehammer and went to work on the Columbus statue. Scott, what you think? Especially considering the question that the headline is asking: catalyst or just more chaos? We often talk about, oh, well, I appreciate what you're doing, and I think that's great, but not quite like this. When we talk about the legacy of Christopher Columbus here in the United States, that's one thing, because he never made it here, and, X, Y, and Z, we were all taught some bullshit in school. Well, he did make it to the Caribbean. He did make it to the island nations. And as I'm sure, as time goes on, a lot of people are down there are reconsidering the way that his legacy is celebrated. Obviously, he still has statues up down there. We took care of that here in Minnesota and across the country. We took care of those statues. Well, this guy, again, who goes by, who calls himself Archangel Michael, he took his sledgehammer and went to work. What do you think?
I think it's more on the catalyst tip, just because when you look around at all the other things that are happening here in the States, for example, we have people going on strike at record numbers. So the workers are starting to starting to say, you know what, we have more power here than you do. The fact that you're hearing more Indigenous Peoples Day rather than Christopher Columbus's birthday or observance or whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's more of catalyst than it is more chaos. But my question is in a place like the Bahamas, are the police going to hunt him down and jail him and all that? I mean, like they do here?
Well, apparently he was detained, and what I've been learning from just talking to folks, because you are in an island nation, it's easy to just get the word from the street.
Right.
I'm hearing that he has a history of mental health challenges, so he was actually put into a mental health facility, but people are celebrating him. This story just spread like wildfire down in the Bahamas and across the Caribbean. I'm sure it'll eventually make its way up here on more of the major news outlets. But of course, I say good job and root on. But what I'm learning from Christine is that down there in the Bahamas, the narrative is sort of mixed. There are some people who are completely on his side. There are other folks that are saying, "Oh, that's not quite the right way to do it." And then there are even folks that say that Columbus's legacy needs to continue to be celebrated, despite what he destroyed, the disease and pestilence and rape and nonsense he spread around the world. They still worship him in that way. So I just think it's an interesting story, yet another example of really stepping outside and disturbing the earth. We'll get to that in the final movement. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that, because from that event, there was music. So an artist who goes by Solo Made put out a tune, and the title here, it says "Freedom for Michael for Bursting Up Columbus." So just wanted to get us rolling here in the first movement by speaking to that bit of news and listening to a bit of this classical music, classical to the tradition of the Bahamas, of course.
Let's hear it.
And the Caribbean. So yeah, here's a little bit of that.
What gone down? Where you was? You ain't had this? You send our boot? On a fridge? You didn't see Michael? You ain't have? Big Saturday evening, Columbus lost his foot and he hand and foot gone. Michael the Archangel almost bust our whole statue down. Where was the officer? He was nowhere to be found. Where you was, bro? He come out scratching his head and wondering what gone down. Oh, yes. A whole archangel come to save the day. He christened Christopher Columbus before holiday. Big hero. Hero. Michael is a hero. Columbus is a zero. Michael is a hero. Oh, oh, hero. Michael is a hero. Columbus is a zero.
Solo Made said Columbus lost he leg and he hand by the time that Michael got done with that sledgehammer, period. Columbus is a zero. I live. So
Did you know that Columbus was jailed in Spain for all of his atrocities? Did you know that he did end up getting thrown?
I didn't know that at all.
Right. And when I went to follow up on that, yeah, him and his crew did do some jail time, 3 weeks.
3 weeks in jail.
Right. And then King Ferdinand sprung him and gave him all of his money back.
See how the institutions will do even centuries ago.
I see it. I see it.
Yeah, incredible work there. Incredible music by Solo Made. Again, that phrase classical music, that's a classical aesthetic of that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. I no one would really argue that there. That's something that we argue here, one of those hairs we split. So shout out to Solo Made for the classical music that he's putting out into the world that is affirming folks like Michael, who is saving the day with a sledgehammer. Amen. Amen. What does the Bible say? Peace is made of steel. Or maybe they said peace be still. I don't know. Either way. All
right.
All right. Well, from the Bahamas to the East Coast and to the West Coast with the Color of Music Festival. You have a Color of Music accidental this week. What accidental are you giving this?
I'm giving this one a sharp. Everything that I brought in today has something to do with COVID.
Okay.
There's an intersection there, and Sacramento has recently been named a city that will get the Color of Music Festival. This is something that started in Charleston, South Carolina back in 2013.
Yep. Shout out to Lee Pringle.
And they were to be giving this festival in Sacramento in 2020, but obviously COVID shut everything down.
Yeah.
But you know that at the beginning of season 2, I said the first orchestra that puts out an all-black season wins, right?
Right.
Okay, well, we're still waiting on that. The jury's out on that one right now.
Isn't it a shame?
And also,
these orchestras around here just quiet.
I heard
when it comes to that anyway.
an interview with Terrence Blanchard earlier today, where he was talking about even Yannick Nézet-Séguin, who conducted the piece. Even he was saying, we cannot expect people to come to us anymore.
That's what Terrence was saying.
Yannick said that.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why he wanted to work with Yannick, was because of that attitude. And I think it's true that you're going to find more and more groups that are taking it to the people. And one of the things that this article talks about is all the different communities, all the different, let me find the exact quote here. We come from every end: tall, big, round, plump, skinny, light brown, dark, almost look white. And that's what I love about who we are as a people. Who
wrote this? Wait a minute. Marcus D. Smith. He said almost look white. Anyway, I'm not here to edit his article.
No, that's a quote from Pringle.
Lee Pringle. Okay, we'll talk.
Okay, so no, he was. This is Carr. His name is Rick Jennings and Larry Carr. They're councilmen
in Sacramento.
That's right. And Larry Carr says Sacramento is a very diverse city. It's made up of many different cultures, many different ethnicities. The color of music fills an important niche because we have not seen a classical orchestra performed by all Black members. And so I needed to say that's the key. The orchestra is all Black musicians. The program is all Black composers.
Black on Black.
Right.
Amen.
So now, doesn't Sphinx Virtuosi do something like this? They give concerts throughout the year, correct?
Yeah, and actually Sphinx Virtuosi is touring right now. They were in New York when I was there. I couldn't fit in my schedule to go, but the difference is that Sphinx centers diversity when it comes to Black and brown communities, Black and Latina musicians and composers and all of that thing, which is very important. It serves its purpose. I think a step even further when it comes to equity is what the Color of Music Festival is doing here, really centering Blackness, and not only centering Blackness in beautiful South Carolina, but now we see across the country, all the way to the West Coast.
So my question for you is, do you see this as a viable option for Black ensembles to begin to really turn the tide? I mean, if they're not seeing the sort of change they would like to have happen in the concert hall,
from the institution,
are they just going to say we're going to take our pogo stick and go and do our own thing?
I like that idea. I think that's something that has to happen because we're seeing, we'll talk about the Met in a second, but 136, 137 years, however many years they've been around, and we're getting the first Black opera,
right?
And then even so, we have, a white conductor and a white orchestra that can't particularly dip into the Black cultural sound of these stories. So, there's even more to go there. So I think what Lee Pringle and Color Music Festival is doing is what has to be done, just in response to the ecosystem that we're in. Yeah.
So along with the article that'll post with the description of the show, there is also a link on how you can get tickets, and you can even watch a little video.
Yeah, go support this orchestra, go support Black Western classical musicians, and support things that are actually pushing the needle forward. It's one thing, and we'll speak to this a lot in this opus. It's one thing to support a well-established institution that is making an attempt to reach out and engage new communities. It's another to actually engage and support the communities themselves in the way that Lee Pringle and the Color of Music Festival is doing. Now, Scott, before we leave this, remind me what the name of this podcast is again.
Oh, here we go. This is TRILLOQUY.
Okay. So I'm gonna keep it trill for a second. I know how some of y'all feel about the Color of Music Festival. If you're a Black and you've dealt with this orchestra before and you have some, I know that exists, and I'm not going to pretend that there aren't certain discourses around some disappointments or some challenges that certain musicians have had with this ensemble, specifically when it comes to pay and timely pay, all right? I understand that we all have to make a living, and it's very important for the institutions to understand that you have to pay its musicians. I get all of that. I'm not giving anyone a pass. I'm not giving Lee Pringle a pass there. What I'm also saying is that job you work for, headed by that white woman or that white man, if she says or if he says you got to wait an extra 2, 3, 4 weeks for your paycheck, you're not going to do nothing but wait for it. So we need to give folks like Lee Pringle and this orchestra and Black communities and Black organizations the same grace that we give some of the institutions. Let's just keep it real here, Scott. Let's keep it trill. If something happened at your job and you found out that your paycheck was going to be 10 days late, I know that would be an issue. I know you would raise a stink. Are you walking away from your job because of that? Are you able to do that?
I'm not able.
Okay.
Let me ask,
so that's what I'm
how
saying.
many weeks on end does that happen? How many? So there's a line, and I don't know where it is.
Right. So we can all draw that line where we can. I just didn't want to be fake and act like I don't know about some of the inner discourse that surrounds this orchestra. This is not me slamming or shitting on this orchestra. I celebrate the Color of Music Festival and its orchestra. I see and hear all of the people that have challenges, you know. We can deal with that, and we can work through that because it's bigger than us. It's bigger than the few $100s or whatever that people get for playing this with this orchestra. And as important as that is, I just want to, highlight what we were just speaking to. We have the ecosystem. We see what the large, well-established institutions will not do. Give Black folks the grace that you give those institutions when it comes to pay, when it comes to travel, when it comes to all of those things. If you aren't able to offer that bit of personal equity, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want people to understand and know that we see you and we see the grace that you give to other institutions. That grace needs to be given to Black institutions. I know that, like, let's back up from race for a minute. Let's say we have a friend who opens up a business or has something going on. It's easy to try to go to them and, buy whatever they want and ask for a discount or whatever, friend discount and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's important to really support, fully what we're doing.
Of course.
Anytime I play one of these shows, especially a Black show, Dell buys a ticket. I don't believe in that comp ticket thing when it comes to specifically when it comes to Black ensembles and Black businesses, because that's how we build. We don't go to Target asking the cashier for a discount and all that stuff. And I feel like I'm talking in a circle because folks also know how I feel about capitalism, as an anti-capitalist in music. That's not specifically the conversation today. All of this just my long way of saying I know and understand and will not pretend that some of the issues that some Black folks have had with this institution don't exist. I'm not going to pretend that they're not there, and I'm going to say we can offer them some grace. So shout out to the Color of Music Festival. Good luck and toy with your performances in Sacramento. I know everything's going to be great, and we need to spread this word.
Are you telling me I brought in a Flutronix?
I'm not. Look, I'm going to repeat. You said you gave him a sharp, so I'm going to repeat that.
All right.
So a sharp to the Color of Music Festival.
Thanks, man.
Not only does the Color of Music Festival do an incredible job of highlighting Black orchestral musicians, they have on multiple occasions highlighted Black women musicians. And it's really incredible to see just an all Black woman orchestra. There was a time when folks didn't even think an all Black orchestra was possible. Where are all of these musicians?
Yes.
Where's this talent? Well, not only have we always been here, the Black women have always been here. So I want to transition with a Color of Music Festival performance that features the women of the orchestra and music by Astor Piazzolla. This is a work of his, a really popular string work by him called Oblivion. The women of the Color of Music Festival. A live concert recording there from
really
a few
sultry
years ago.
Approach.
Very sultry. And I mean, who to play sultry music so beautifully, but a group of Black women. I mean, you can't take identity out of the music and the experience. Shout out to Onyango Yarbo Davenport, who was the soloist you heard there and leading the orchestra. I met Onyango years ago on a bus. We were doing something in Rochester, and we just had a chat there, and it's great to see her featured. We have Lady Jess here in the group with a number of other really incredible musicians. There go Leslie. You met Leslie at Sphinx.
I did.
Remember? So again, shout out to all of the women of the Color of Music Festival. Shout out to Lee Pringle and best of luck over there in Sacramento. All right. Well, the final accidental for this first movement, I'm going to give it a sharp because it's New York, and it was a lot of really great performances. Remember, we used to say Streets is done, especially during COVID. Well, I have to say, without a doubt, Streets is bike in New York. It's crowded. The train is hot. Half of y'all ain't got y'all mask on right, but you know what? I was there. And I did it.
I would have the worst case of hives.
Before I get into Fire Shut Up in My Bones, I just want to give just a few little rundowns of some of the other things that I did there. So I want to shout out Jonathan for taking me to this restaurant in Chinatown that specializes in this type of fried chicken that apparently was invented when Black soldiers were stationed over in Asia during the Korean War. And they, collaborated and came up with this new style. The folks over there had the chicken. The Black people had the seasoning and spices and spirit. And when you put it together, you have something new. So shout out to Jonathan for taking me over there. I visited my brother Ryan and his girlfriend Nicole. They live over in Bushwick. Ryan is a visual artist. I'll link his website and things in the description of this in case you are a visual art lover. I have art on my walls, but he's an actual artist who does all of this. So yes, huge shout out to them. It was great to see them. I got to visit Caesar, member of the TRILLOQUY family.
Sure.
We did some Buddhist things. Shout out to all of the SGI members. And he also showed me a new documentary that he put together on Paul Robeson. And when he was showing me that, Scott, I was thinking about Bill Morlock. So before TRILLOQUY was a thing a few years ago, and I'm just developing ideas on what's something, that I can do. He told me that Paul Robeson is a name I need to know. So the first time I heard that name was from Bill Morlock. So if you aren't familiar with the legacy of Paul Robeson, please go learn. This is a incredible singer. When he was alive in the early to mid 20th century, the most famous Black person alive, the most famous Black person, incredible singer. And he famously said he wasn't singing in none of y'all opera houses because there aren't Black people there. So he went on and continued to sing, but used his music in activist spaces for solidarity, for workers, the working class, for intercountry relations, just really doing something that was so much bigger than just being in the opera house. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing and that people can't aspire to do those things, but what would happen, Scott, if every musician said, you know what? I'm not playing here until y'all diversify this audience. We would quickly see a change, or maybe we would, or maybe we would see the institutions go away. I don't know which one we would see. But
maybe
Paul Robeson is a fine example of what it means to just really put the movement before our own personal career gains and all that sort of stuff. So definitely check out Paul Robeson if you don't know his legacy.
There's a documentary called Bring On the Night with Sting and his band as they start going off after the Police broke up, and their manager is trying to talk with some of the members of the band. And we're not talking slouches in this band. Omar Hakim playing drums with Kenny Kirkland playing the keyboard and Branford Marsalis on soprano sax. The bass player used to play with Miles Davis. I mean, these are all top flight players. And the manager says, if Sting says he's not coming in, nobody's going to show up.
Right.
It's not that you guys aren't great. But if one of you drop out, nobody's going to sell their ticket, right?
Yeah.
But if we see, what if a whole orchestra walks?
Right.
Not just your star.
For this issue, not because y'all are getting a 20% pay cut on y'all's 6-figure salary, but because you actually stand for something.
Not just the soloist or the conductor.
Right.
Your entire wind section, your entire string section.
Yeah.
They're going to have to listen at that point. I'm
Absolutely.
saying that's what I was saying at the beginning about all these strikes. Labor is showing up right now.
as I've been repeating on this show and with folks personally, over the past few months, at one point, anti-racism and so-called classical music didn't seem like two things that you can mesh together or
Mhm.
or two relevant conversations. But now we're seeing that at the center of so much.
Right.
We're seeing anti-capitalism and so-called classical music begin to happen. I think we're headed in that direction, and it's a conversation that we can't ignore for too much longer. Anyway,
Mhm.
shout out to Caesar and shout out to the legacy, the late great Paul Robeson. I went to a Flutronix concert. I'll speak more to that in the second movement when we take the second ending. But I wanted to quickly speak to a recital I went to at Juilliard. So they have different recital series that mix faculty with students playing some of the tried and true pieces. There was a solo performance of Debussy's Clair de Lune on this concert, but there was
Nice.
also a lot of new music. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Timothy Hayward. He's a sax professor up there and offered the world premiere of a saxophone duo that was really, really, really incredible. There was some solo viola music that was really fun to hear. Anthony McGill was on the program. He played a unaccompanied clarinet piece by Adolphus Hailstork that was really phenomenal. So just all kinds of great music happening at the institutional level there. It's easy for me, someone like me, to throw rocks at Juilliard, but when I go into the space and see this kind of effort put into new music, black music, and underrepresented music, it gives me some hope. It gives
Yeah.
me some hope. It was great to see. But again, this podcast is called TRILLOQUY, so I have to speak to some of the other things I heard
Ruh-roh.
specifically on this concert. Okay, and I'm not going to speak specifically to any of the performers. I'm just going to talk to the teachers. Okay, so private music teachers, if you're at a conservatory, if you're teaching beginners, if you're at a high school, at a state school, wherever you are, this is for the teachers. Your students do not know how to play a phrase. They don't know how to sing through their instruments. The more guest master classes I go to, the more student recitals and all of those things I'm hearing. I hear an emphasis on developing the technique, really being able to move those fingers fast, and that's an important part of learning, how to master an instrument and play at a top level. But you also have to be able to emote through your instrument. If I were one of these teachers, if I were a teacher anywhere right now, my students would be singing the music that they bring in, because if you cannot sing it, if you're too shy to use your voice and emote this music, that means that you couldn't possibly take an inanimate object and put those feelings through it. It's just simply impossible. So I'm going to say that I challenge every single teacher to take your students, find the slowest, the most half note and quarter note piece of music you can, and see how much juice your students can squeeze out of that music. We really need to do a better job of teaching our students how to play musically. And I know I know that sounds like such a simple thing or whatever, but I'm hearing a lot of just inability to emote through instruments. And if that's happening at Juilliard, I'm sure that's happening everywhere. So I hope all of the teachers are thinking about that. This recital was wrapped up with a few words and a performance by the one and only Valerie Coleman. It was great to see her live and hear her live. She actually has some collaborations coming up with the American Composers Forum, so I'm looking forward to being in dialogue with her again. But they closed the concert with a performance of Valerie Coleman's Umoja. Umoja, of course, being the Swahili word for unity and one of the guiding principles of Kwanzaa. So as we get into my fire shut up in my bones thoughts and reviews, we'll listen to a little Umoja to get us there. Unity. you hear how Jeff Scott, and this is the original iteration of Amani Wins. This is one of their first albums. They've changed personnel since. But do you hear how Jeff Scott is taking that horn and pushing something through it? He's not just playing ba 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 ba, but like there's music there. There's feeling, and we need to do a better job of teaching our students how to do that, because I feel like that's what's separating musicianship and musicians right now. So that piece of music specifically, of course, I've been using, in my programming for years now. I remember back in 2016, the first time I had to program for the holiday season, I thought I was doing something by finding a Kwanzaa adjacent piece of music. And I know a lot of folks are more familiar with this now, considering the places that the conversation has gone when it comes to race and identity and chamber music and Western classical music. So I know a lot of people know this too now, but I feel like one of the OGs of this one. So it was really...
You put Umoja where it is?
I can't say that, but it was great to hear it live. You can speak to a piece of music that you've loved to a long time, and getting to hear it live for the first time,
it literally
really
comes
cool.
alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So shout out to Valerie Coleman, and congratulations on all of the incredible work you are doing. All right, Scott. Well, it's time to get to what everyone is waiting for. The Fire Shut Up in My Bones review.
Ooh, we get this bed music.
It was dramatic, and I had many emotions while watching. I was filled, I was happy, I was sad, I was angered, I was frustrated, and a little bit of everything in between. So I'm going to speak to some of the things I appreciated, some of my challenges, and I'll wrap back around to some good things. So
okay.
We'll do it that way. So the first thing I want to say is that the visuals were really, really, really incredible. It's been a while since I've been in a live theater of any type. So seeing such a simple set, the set is just a big box, a big wooden crate box and a smaller wooden crate box, but they shift them around, and there must be some sort of some belts or something on the stage, because sometimes the characters would freeze and slide off stage.
Man,
and
stagecraft has grown leaps and bounds, man.
It is incredible. Yeah. So the first thing I want to say, and I'll give a round of applause to the stage direction.
Yeah.
Is that the right phrase? I hope they win something, because I was so utterly impressed by just the visual of it all.
The whole set design.
It was really, really, really incredible. As you walk into the theater, into the Met, there is a Bible scripture on the on the stage, and I thought I would get us started by reading a little bit of that. But when I go to the Bible, I have to get some good music going. So let me give a shout out to Lyle's Music. I'll have his link in the description of this, offering some beautiful organ music here. Let me read for you here. If you have your Bibles, amen, turn to the book of Jeremiah. I'm reading from the 20th chapter. It says here, "But if I say, I will not mention his word or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it. Indeed, I cannot." Amen. So just let's start there quickly, Scott. When you hear that scripture about the idea of something that needs to be said just burning inside of you like a fire shut up in my bones, is that something that you've experienced, really feeling something until it comes right out?
Ever since I've been about 8 years old.
Okay. Oh, so you've been sanctified for a long time. Amen.
I don't know about that.
Okay. So
no, but feeling like you've got something in you and it's about to just burst out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I thought it was very great. I didn't realize that, I'm a Bible reader. I'm familiar with the things in the Bible, but I didn't make that connection. So I think it was kind of cool to see that context as soon as you walked into the theater, that projected on the curtain. The Metropolitan Opera House has in-seat subtitles, so it's not super titles above the stage. On the back of the chair in front of you, you can press a button and you can just read there as you go along. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's slick.
Look at me giving the Met some flowers here. Okay. The crowd was incredible. That was my other favorite thing about it. When we think about going to the opera, going to the opera house, what are we thinking about but an opera house full of old white people with money, right? Well, this did not look like that. It was a very diverse audience. It was an audience that looked like New York, and the same visions that I have when I'm walking down the street, when I'm on the train, when I'm in the hotels or whatever. I also saw that in the opera house and in the plaza afterwards outside of the opera house. And that was just really encouraging to see. I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel like I looked funny or because, I was Afrocentric and my shirt was a hit.
Mm-hmm.
I got many compliments on that. So, because I was nervous about what to wear. Right. But
did you get any hassle from the Met personnel?
Oh, no, dare not. But there were people even dressed more down than me. Like I saw some sweats and t-shirts there.
Oh, good.
But I think, again, that speaks to opening up the space and really being equitable in that way. So shout out to the crowd. It felt like a homecoming of sorts. I saw Delaney there, from Classically Black. Shout out to Delaney. I was hanging out with members of the Black Opera Alliance. Joelle Thompson spotted me, and we spoke for a little bit. So it was just cool to, not only see everyone in the audience, but to see Will Liverman on stage really cooking, member of the TRILLOQUY family. Incredible performances, not only by Will Liverman, but Angel Blue, who we'll hear from here in a few minutes. LaTanya Moore, if you don't know her name, look her up. She played an incredible role in Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And there was a boy actor singer named Walter Russell III. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from him and hearing his name circulate more in the future because he did a really incredible job. The opera starts sort of at the end, like a lot of stories do, and then it flashes back and gives you the context and circles all the way back around until you get back to that opening scene. So this is something that I didn't realize would happen. So Walter Russell III is prominently featured throughout the opera. Really, really incredible singer. I'm happy to see a little Black boy on stage getting to do that. At the same time that we talk about the challenges and everything that needs to change at the Met, even us, tearing the Met down. He must feel great to hear all of those thousands of people. I think the Met seats 3,500 and it was full, so to have that adulation, and that applause as a young kid, probably 9, 10, 11 years old, I'm really happy for him to have that experience.
With ticket sales where they are, do you think that that's enough of a signal to the Met that there's an audience for this?
Well, the issue is that the Meistersinger is full. Carmen is full. All of the most traditional things are full.
Yes, and
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that they're seeing it that way. They can definitely, I hope they're understanding the way in which the audience looked different, a much more diverse, a much more colorful audience. I'm not sure that the audience was more crowded because the Met always sells out. So it's going to be a more nuanced conversation than just the money and the ticket sales there.
Just curious.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the themes of this opera. And this is a spoiler alert. If you want to go in blind or watch this when it comes through your city or whatever, just fast forward through this because I'm going to be giving a few spoilers. So the main character, Will Liverman, and Walter Russell III's character is named Charles. Charles is ostracized from a kid, from when he was young, for being soft, the youngest of all of his siblings who are all male, the youngest of 5. He's described constantly as being sweet as pecan pie, but sweet nonetheless. He's there are also a few lines throughout the opera that's refer to him as a boy of peculiar grace. So when you hear that language describing a young boy, soft, sweet, peculiar grace, is there anything that comes to your mind?
All of those things but grace. Because when I felt all those things when I was coming up. I was all elbows and knees with an Adam's apple on top. Awkward. Felt like I was the least masculine of the 3 brothers.
Sure.
got my ass kicked on a daily basis. So yeah, I feel all of that.
Yeah, so that character, that part of the story is one that many people can speak to and see themselves in different ways. Well, as we get through the first act of this opera, that sweetness, so that so-called sweetness and softness attracts one of Charles's older cousins, who ends up sexually abusing Charles, and they don't show that on stage. I think the way they do it is very artistic, so we don't have to look at that sort of nonsense, on stage, but it's you very much understand what's happening. And when you mix that description, this sweet, soft person, with the sexual abuse and the and continually being ostracized, for being soft and sweet and all of those things, it reminded me of one of those deep Black things, and maybe it even goes beyond Black communities, but the idea that queer people, especially Black queer people, have some sort of foundation in sexual abuse. When I was coming up, I can't tell you how many people, especially when I was younger, when, before I was dating and maybe before I presented as gay or whatever, a lot of people say, well, gay people, most of them were abused as children, and that's why, that happens. Why am I bringing that up now? Because as the opera continues, Charles takes that trauma and is internalizing it in a really harmful way to him. Again, getting back to that title and that scripture, fire shut up in my bones. He is dealing with a lot of sexual pressure. His brother's making fun of him because he hasn't had sex with a woman. Charles's inability to maintain a relationship. I think throughout this opera, especially in that first act, it's very obvious that we are seeing a young queer man described, a young queer boy described, especially with language like soft and sweet, describing a young boy like that. And when you put that beside continued ostracization, I don't know if that's a word, continually being ostracized, and his inability to maintain a relationship with a woman because he feels like that's what he's supposed to do. That was very triggering for me. I didn't like that. And I'm not saying that, the librettist and the composer were wrong for going that route. But it was definitely triggering. And again, considering that this is the first Black story being told on this most famous of stages, I'm not sure if that's the most appropriate way to introduce white audiences to Black stories and Black art, because who knows what they're gonna walk away from when it comes to, oh well, yeah, I always knew that Black people were the real homophobes and they're the ones that are holding people back. These are all narratives, and maybe that's a fire shut up in my own bones, my own baggage or whatever. But I couldn't help but to think about all of those things as I got through this first act. If the audience didn't look the way it did, if it wasn't a very diverse audience, if it was an all white audience with furs and pearls and tuxedos, I probably would have left, because that would have made me too uncomfortable seeing that narrative put in front of that audience in that space.
I understand where you're coming from, but I was not anticipating hearing you say that, because from my perspective, you seem to be the sort of person that is you seem to be talking from my perspective, like ease people into it. Whereas what I know of you is very much come bursting into the room like Rambo without a jockstrap and hit everybody in the face with it. So, but I heard in that interview about that scene
with Terrence Blanchard,
right? And Terrence, I was about to mention that Terrence Blanchard said in the interview that that was very intentional to show them on the opposite sides of the bed.
Right.
The aftermath of it was more important.
Yeah.
The act of the abuse,
right,
was the catalyst. If you want to talk about catalyst versus chaos,
yeah,
the aftermath is the bigger hit.
Yeah.
So why pull back the reins on that? If it happens and if you're trying to make an impact, why not lean into it like that?
Yeah, I just think it leans into some of those deep Black issues and deep Black stereotypes, again, that approximate child sexual abuse with queer Black men. I don't know that Charles's character is explicitly described as queer, but every queer Black man and probably every queer Black woman and the straight people as well in the audience, the Black folks understand the underscore of what the librettist and what the composer is speaking to, because that's just Black culture. This is a Black story, and we can't help but to bring our Blackness to the space. So if it were up to me, I wish there was just a little bit more sensitivity and intentionality behind that, if that's what we're going to do, to more explicitly, name this issue. As we get on throughout more of the opera, Charles grows up, and this is when you have Will Liverman, on stage performing. He goes to church and gets saved, and there's that dry, very stodgy praise break that that the Met Orchestra played, no shade but shade. He goes off to college to become a real man, quote unquote, by joining a fraternity, by becoming a Kappa. They show there are depictions of the fraternity hazing on stage and all of that thing, which I think speaks to another issue. We have to, we can depict those things. I feel like we have to also, in depicting that sort of violence, speak to how it's dangerous and how it's harmful. And it was, that specifically, the fraternity hazing was depicted on stage as just something normal. I have a friend, I won't name who he is, but he pledged Kappa I guess I'm in my 30s. So this was probably about 15 years ago when, we were hanging out and he was telling me stories. Without being too graphic, okay, he was raped, as a part of his hazing, okay, and was so injured. I'm trying to be careful with my words. He was so injured, had to go to the hospital and deal with that, okay. And I'm not naming any names or anything, but we can't normalize in opera spaces, again, for white folks who do not understand the nuance and the history of something like the Divine Nine. We can't normalize, in my opinion, we can't normalize that sort of abuse and that sort of hazing, especially toward the goal of becoming a quote unquote real man, that being a way to deal with this sexual trauma in your life. And of course, there have been lots of conversations about the use of the Kappa Alpha Psi colors and all of that stuff. Did Terrence Blanchard speak to that in the interview you watched?
He did. I guess that when it opened in St. Louis, there was a time consideration or a continuity thing that they were trying to deal with. I don't remember exactly. You can find it on NPR, National Public Radio's website. But that was one of the scenes that they suggested cutting, was the Kappa dance. And he said, absolutely not. This is such a huge part of Black culture and who we are that he wanted that to remain. And so that...
He's right about that.
Right. But so, and I've seen reactions that disagree with that online. That's not my fight. I don't understand it. Okay, so I'm not going to argue it. But that scene and the aftermath of the rape and all that, would the piece have been as impactful if those parts were removed?
My concern specifically with the Kappa scene is, are those folks Kappas? Because perpetrating or perping, as some people say, is very that's big in Black communities. If I were on stage in any capacity as any sort of actor, I'll do a lot of things, okay? But that is not one of the things that I would do. I would never put on colors, in that way. There's a line in there that basically says, Kappas bend, don't break. We aren't like, the alphas. We aren't like the Qs, so even naming other Black fraternities. And in the plaza afterwards, I saw a man who was wearing his Q colors, another Black fraternity. And I look at folks like him and wonder if he was thinking the same thing. Are these people actual Kappas, or is Black culture being appropriated by Black people for a white audience? You see, I know it gets heavy and it gets deep and really convoluted, but that's something. And, after the hazing and X, Y, and Z, Charles, Will Liverman's character, puts on the Kappa colors. And I don't know if he's a Kappa or not, but I'm going to give, the stage folks the benefit of the doubt for having done the research and finding the right actors and singers, the ones who are actually Kappas. But I don't know. That's sensitive. So I think maybe we'll see that develop more. By the way, the cousin who commits the sexual abuse is named Chester, and I don't know if Chester child molester.
Very
or
much a
okay,
thing.
yeah. So again, like
I was about to say that. I thought, oh wait, I don't know though.
and that's very much what happened.
Wow.
So all in all, I enjoyed my time there, but I couldn't help but to just continue to think that this is a Black story that has been put together specifically for white people and for a white space. And there are Black tropes and Black conversations that are happening that I'm not sure that type of white audience has the cultural competency to really understand. We might have some white folks who leave out of there and put on their own play or whatever and have some kappas on stage, or dip into the relationship between child sexual abuse and queer identity, those deep Black discussions that, we're still having and many of us are still struggling with. So it's powerful, it's heavy. It just, for me, it reiterates the fact that we Black folks, we need our own artistic spaces, because I think there are places where this opera could go and conversations that it could inspire that certain communities, Black communities, need to have. I hope that it didn't do more harm than good, especially considering the type of audience. Again, the orchestra was underwhelming to me, and that's no personal shade against the Met, but I mean, these folks are making six figures, and there are actual tuning issues that I was hearing in the cellos when the cellos were playing high multiple times. I think two spots that I'm thinking about, there were tuning issues, and this is an orchestra that folks hail as the greatest in the country, one of the greatest in the world, and y'all are doing that. So, is it the fact that you aren't playing something that you have played a cajillion times, so you aren't used to doing something different and maybe it's harder? Is it the fact that this is Black cultural music that you can't quite dig into? I'm just not sure if the Met Orchestra was Terrence Blanchard's best instrument for this. If it was a Black orchestra down there, it would have sounded different, and it would have elevated the experience. I think there must have been like a jazz trio or something down in the pit, because it was a guitar player getting it. I'm gonna have to find out who that guitar player was, but I just don't think that the Met Orchestra was the best instrument for this when it comes to the club scenes, the jazz music, the praise break again that I was speaking to. I don't know if that sort of orchestra that is used to playing that white European 100-year-old music could, if they have the training to really put that through. And again, we can't undo the fact that this is the first Black story on this stage. So, I wish that the first time that this institution is celebrating something Black, it could have been a story with a little, I hate to say less nuance, maybe I mean to say less sticky subjects that I consider things that Black folks need to continue to deal with. I would have loved to see a story filled with more jubilation, more celebration of different types of Black people. I think this story sort of reiterates the idea of the Black woman savior and the Black man who ain't shit. We see that a lot in the Tyler Perry movies and that sort of thing. And then, to that, with this Chester child molester, and also Charles's mother, her husband, Charles's dad, is cheating on her. So, there's that evil Black man in the story. When it comes to the curtain calls, they're booed, right? So these two Black men are booed. I don't like the idea of Black men being booed by white men and white women at the Met. I don't like that. I know that you have a history of experience in theater and being the villain on stage and feeling good.
Getting booed.
Yeah. I mean, but no, we talked about it. Like you're saying that an actor has done his job when the audience has that reaction to a villain character. Many examples of that in the traditional opera canon. Don Giovanni is always booed, but in that space and for this point of history, I didn't like that.
Okay.
I didn't like that.
I hear it. I hear that, but if somebody can elicit that response, they did the job. That's what I think.
Okay, and we can have varying opinions on that, and
No,
that's
we
fine.
can't.
But no, we can. But for me, no, don't boo a black man at the Met the first time black men are on stage telling a black story. I just didn't like it. Okay,
I hear you.
All right, so looping. I don't want to spend too much time here just unraveling everything, but looping back around to some of the good. I appreciated the show. I appreciated the experience again of being able to go to the Met for the first time and feel at home. See folks there that I know. See black fashion, black just expression that makes me not feel othered. It makes me feel like I belong in the space. It was an incredible experience for me. I stand by the fact that they need to lower those tickets though. Okay, because that is
Heard that.
you're not, and it was full. So again, it's something because they know they can sell out. They just knew with this that they could get some of the black dollars involved as well. So in the same way that we support these artists, these black artists that were on this stage, we need to support the black institutions as well, because at the end of the day, all of the money that we gave in supporting this show is going back into this institution for the majority of what they do to be that old European white music that doesn't speak to not only black communities but contemporary communities at all. So we have to think about that. Huge shout out to the Opera Theater of St. Louis for premiering this show. I hope that we don't leave them in the shadows when we talk about the Met staging a black story for the first time, because they're the ones that put it out. And there are even other opera companies that have done black stories. So we need to make sure that we're not celebrating the Met, we're celebrating the musicians, because the Met is not leading the charge when it comes to this. Not even with this opera are they leading the charge. It took another opera house to do that first. I'll repeat myself, visually stunning. I really appreciated that. And I hope that more people get to see this opera, because it definitely inspires some really important conversations, and some conversations that I think black folks specifically need to have. I just hate the idea of thinking that it's some white wokeness that was born from the experience of seeing that, because as we know, that can often do more harm than good. I was telling you before we cut on the mics, at the end of the show, I went to the restroom. I'm standing at the urinal. This old white man comes right next to me, dick in hand, talking about, oh, wasn't it just so phenomenal for your stories to be told up there on stage? So it's always going to be some problems, especially when it comes to institutions like that. But all in all, I enjoyed myself. So I hope more
Welcome
people get
back.
to see it. Yeah,
I'm glad you made it through the airport and the airplane ride and everything.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep good tonight, because this tired old body of mine just can't take me to New York. My favorite performer for Fire Shut Up in My Bones was Angel Blue. She played a character called Destiny, and I think it was more of a spiritual character, just the thoughts and the ideas that Charles's character was having throughout the show. At the end of Act 1, she's singing some of those vocal runs in a way that made me want to hear her sing something that was an opera, because I could hear in that voice there was some music that she could really make. And again, a few minutes ago, I was speaking to, teaching our students how to really sing that phrase, how to put the emotion through what you're doing. Angel Blue did an incredible job of that. So we're going to transition into the second movement of this opus by listening to Angel Blue. I didn't want to hear her sing any more opera, because I've heard enough opera for a little while, but she has a really incredible rendition here of Aretha Franklin's Natural Woman that I'll share. Bravo, Angel Blue. I really enjoyed hearing it. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? That's the thing. Black people, we can do it all. We can sing y'all's opera. We can sing our own music and everything in between, and we do it to a level that is beyond. I can't say enough great words about Angel Blue. I loved hearing her on stage. That was an incredible experience to me. All right. My opinions are mine. I could go in longer. I can speak longer. We're already running long here, but I encourage people to check it out. I'm not saying don't watch this opera. I'm saying go into the opera understanding that this is a Black story that was written for a white space at the end of the day. And with that, we have to understand that some of those Black narratives that are put on stage, that are portrayed in this opera, it might not be necessary. It might not be appropriate, to say, for some of the folks in that audience, because it's easy for things to get twisted and misconstrued, for things to be reiterated that are problematic. Again, I can't say enough how just insidious the idea of a queer Black man being abused as a child being just the narrative. That, I was not abused as a child. I know many were, but I was not. And having dealt with that narrative for so many years of my own development, just hearing people matter-of-factly say, well, he was probably abused as a child. That's something that I think deserves more nuance, deserves more conversation, and can't just be put on stage like that without any context for people who don't have any idea of what narrative is being reiterated there. I hope I'm making sense. So just keep that in mind as you check out this opera, and be sure to celebrate all the incredible Black talent. We just need to get a Black orchestra down there in the pit, because the Met Opera Orchestra was not it for me.
Maybe next time.
Not for me. All right. We're here in the second movement, where we take the second ending. We take a piece of music that we've been repeating over the week, and we talk a little bit about why we were repeating it, why we love it so much. How about you get us started with the second movement?
Once again, what I have to bring in intersects with COVID. And also last week I brought in an article from Wisconsin Public Radio. This artist is a Houston native but grew up in Milwaukee. And after COVID delays, Milwaukee music scene veteran Carl Nichols releases his debut Buffalo Nichols album. He's been signed on to Fat Possum Records, and that's a big label for your Americana, your blues and folk and things like that. That's not small news.
Yeah.
So this is great news for him. But
is it unusual for a Black person to be in this space and to be signed to that record label? So this is something that's
they have
happening.
they have healthy representation.
Good for them.
Yeah. But I found Buffalo Nichols. You guys go and check out on Instagram Mule Resonator Guitars. Mule as in the animal.
Hee-haw. Okay,
right.
Yeah.
So this guy in Saginaw, Michigan starts making metal resonator guitars in his garage. 5-6 years later, all of the best players have his machines.
Yeah.
He started making a metal Telecaster that is so dirty and rough sounding that I love. The guitar that Carl is playing in the video that I found is their newest model, the Mavis, an absolutely beautiful wood body with the metal cone, tortoise shell pickguard above and below the fretboard. It is a beautiful guitar, but the playing, you talked about the
singing through the instrument.
Well, there's that, but also the woman that was dancing in church, how pure it was.
Oh yes, Sister Karen Phillips. Amen.
When Carl plays, I love the blues bands of today. They get up there with the screaming guitars, and 8-minute long solos in that. But there's something about the player that is just the voice and the instrument, the purity of that, keeping the tempo going, that right thumb bouncing on the bass line, and the slide coming in to punctuate some of the vocals. There's one of the tracks that I was going to bring in called Living Hell. I was going to bring in Living Hell, but instead I decided to bring in Lost and Alone, because
Lost and Lonesome, it looks like it's called.
Is it Lost and Lonesome? And when his voice comes in, he is breathing these lyrics.
If you see me in your town, looking tired with my head hanging down,
appreciate not only hearing this, but seeing this. Again, we'll have the link to this performance in the description, but, newcomers may not know, but folks who have been with TRILLOQUY for a while, anytime I hear a sliding guitar, I hear I hear that word that ends with But seeing a black man really capture that sound in a beautiful way with his really incredible voice, incredible to witness. I love it. I love it.
Do you know how many white people go down to Mississippi to try to learn to play in this style?
Yeah.
And that's what I might ask you about. You're talking about a musician singing through their instrument, a white orchestra not being able to quite catch the ring to catch the spirit of the black music story.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what's happening here. So when you talk purity, I think that Buffalo Nichols has it.
Yeah.
And his studio album is great, but this is just him in a room, microphone, guitar, and he can sound like that.
And to rope it back around to the general point of TRILLOQUY, the general point of this show, that is a style of singing and playing that wasn't imported from somewhere else. No one in Europe invented that, or on any other continent. That's something that grew from the black autochthonous tradition of the United States. So if we can't consider that classical music, we don't understand the definition of classical music. We don't understand the definition and the relationship between culture and music and the way it evolves. That is purely American. It's purely black, and it's everything. That's some really incredible music.
Go and check out Buffalo Nichols. His album is out, but watch the video. Live in Mississippi. Those are the good ones.
Yeah. Well, as I alluded to earlier, the opera and the Juilliard concert weren't the only things that I saw, the live music that I saw when I was in New York. I went over to the Kaufman Center, and I was lucky enough to get a ticket to the sold-out performance of Flutronix, a flute and electronics duo comprised of Natalie Joachim and Allison Loggins Hull. Allison was actually on TRILLOQUY a while back, but seeing them together and live in concert was really phenomenal. The first time I heard the name Natalie Joachim was when I learned about an ensemble named Eighth Blackbird. Have you heard of Eighth Blackbird?
Sure. Yeah. Amazing ensemble.
That's when I learned who she was, back in my early radio days and really getting into the contemporary music. Well, after learning about Flutronix, I really started to appreciate all of the different sounds that could be created with two flutes. You think of a flute duet, and you think of, I don't know, bird sounds or something, maybe nothing that can be too engaging, but between Natalie and Allison, so many sounds are created. First of all, Natalie is an incredible singer, and when she sings and uses the loop machines and all of those stuff, she's singing with a smile on her face the whole time. So not only are you getting the spirit of the music, you're getting the spirit of the performance of the music. She wants you to be happy to hear this because she's happy to perform it. So incredible to hear. A lot of the music that they played on the concert isn't out yet. Their albums and tracks that are coming out later in 2022. But they ended the concert with one of their tried and true favorites, a tune called Lifelines. I'd like to take a bit of a listen to that here. So you'll watch them on stage and they'll press play on the track. But as they press play on the track, they're also pushing different buttons, to add different sounds and take things away. The flute playing, as far as I could tell, was all live. I don't even think it was looped. They're just playing on top of this. Natalie will play something and Allison will push a button, and then vice versa. So it's not only the meeting of the minds when it comes to the flute playing, it's the meeting of the minds when it comes to playing the instrument that is the loop machine, that is the electronic samples and all of that sort of thing. I was dancing just now as as we were listening to it, and I was dancing there in the concert. You know, we started by talking about older age and all that sort of thing. In my
Yeah.
older age, I'm also losing certain inhibitions. So I was in there doing the nay nay and everything. I mean, because I was feeling it, and more people were doing that. Alicia Waller was there. I got to meet her, another member
Cool.
of the TRILLOQUY family, and she
Yeah.
was saying the same thing. You know how this music is so danceable, is so light, is so happy. You can't help but to have that reaction. As we continue to talk about the ways in which we want the concert experience to change, the audiences, I think we as audience members have to have the courage to really go into those spaces and react to the music in the way that we want to. Well, I know that we're trained to keep quiet, keep still, don't be distracting. But if I'm on stage and someone is like, "You better play," or that boy good," or whatever they said, I'll remember on Coming to America.
Right.
That's what performers want to hear, want to experience. So we have to have the courage as audience members to respond in that way
So
and really change up the audience experience.
So I know that you didn't like the booing of a black man on stage.
Right.
Do you think that he appreciated it? Do you think that he was like, "Oh yeah, I got you"?
Maybe, but they are a part of opera culture, and the vast majority of black people are not. So
Well, the problem that I see here,
that's that.
the problem that I see here is that video was released in 2014 and has 479 views. So y'all go and listen to this.
This Flutronix.
Yeah, go
please
listen to
go
this
check
track.
out Lifelines. Let's catch a bit of the end of it here, just to give another shout out and celebration to Flutronix. I'm not even going to ask you. I'm not going to bother to institute the conversation of whether or not, some of the folks or work with would consider that appropriate for classical, but that's where we were. The show was sold out. We were reacting to the music in real time in a way that really inspired us. We're seeing that so-called classical training, that Western training, that flute playing at the highest level demonstrated on top of the many other sounds that these two black women can create. This is the future, and pushing back against that general aesthetic in classical spaces is only going to leave you behind. So I hope everyone will think about that as you think about the ways that you want to program black music moving forward. There might be a little beat, it might be a little groove to it or vibe to it. That's good. You don't have to be afraid of that. So let's embrace that and really make sure that ensembles like Flutronix have more of a front seat in these programming conversations, and not an other seat or a specialty show seat or any of that auxiliary things. We have to center that, because that's what I center. I'll go to that concerts like that every weekend. I don't think you're going to see me at the Opera House every week, every month even. But if we can have more of that as the norm, I feel like the folks who are attracted to that will become more of the norm.
Was the ticket to Flutronix affordable?
It was free.
I would file that under affordable.
It was free. So what does that tell you? All right. Well, we're going to leave New York for a bit and go over to the West Coast. Today's guest for the third movement is Dr. Alexander Lloyd Blake. He leads an ensemble called TONALITY. I'll read a little bit about TONALITY here from their website. It says, TONALITY is best known for creating choral concerts that focus on issues rarely presented in choral music. Concert themes have included gun violence, homelessness, refugees, climate change, mental health, women's rights, and exercising democratic rights. So this is an ensemble that doesn't just play with the idea of the real world and engaging the real world. They really center it. So I talk with Dr. Alexander Lloyd Blake about creating TONALITY, what it means to choose the different issues that they dig into, other challenges, and all sorts of things. We start the conversation with transitioning from artist to activist and what it means to to toe that line and have to make that transition as an artist, as so many have, Paul Robeson and others. So I hope you enjoy this conversation between myself and Dr. Alexander Lloyd Blake. To get us there, I want to feature a tonality performance. So one of the issues that they addressed head on earlier this year, this video came out in April. It's a tune written by Dr. Blake called 1, 2, 3 to Life. It speaks to the issue of the 3 strike rule and how that has disproportionately impacted the lives of Black men. Taking that conversation and putting it into the choral space. So here's a little bit of 1, 2, 3 to Life by Dr. Alexander Lloyd Blake, and this is my conversation with Dr. Blake. Hope you enjoy.
1, 2, 1, 3.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 2 and 1, 2, 3, and 3 and 1, 2, 3, and 2 and 1, 2, 3, and 3 and 1, 2, 3, and 2 and 1, 2, 3, and 3 and 1, 2, 3, and 2 and 1, 2, 3, and 3 and 1, 2 and 3, and 2 and 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 and 3, and 2 and 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 and 3, and 2 and 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 and 3, and 2 and 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
You know, I think my own experience growing up in so many environments. Growing up in religious environments as a gay person, growing up in classical music environments as a Black person, there's so many ways I have not been seen and have not been validated. And I think when you come to that from a personal place, and as you work through those experiences, when you notice that other people are dealing with those same experiences, it's really hard to sit by and be like, oh, I understood what that felt like, but that's not my issue. And so I think more often, I said, in addition to that, I think also, on the other hand, when you start to feel what it feels like to be included and to be valued, when you see someone else who is searching for that and hasn't found that yet, and you are in a place where you can create that, I think it really does bring a joy. And so for me, the most special parts of kind of our concerts and kind of our experiences is when I get to hear from, or I get to watch someone who might have felt on the margins, on the outside, kind of feel like they are brought in. And so that is what drives me personally. Just that intention to be seen and heard and validated is one that I hope we can continue to spread.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the birth of tonality, but I'm not going to let us skirt by something that you just said, coming up in the church as a gay person. And I think that's significant because for so many folks of our hue, church is where that love for music was sort of born, where we learn how to sing and to do all of those things. I certainly have my struggles, growing up in the church as a queer person, but I wonder how you continue to think about that issue specifically, that very intersectional issue of this space that has been the catalyst for so many of us to love music and go into music, and at the same time it being an oppressive space, but how we're rooting for everybody Black and trying to be community. I mean, how do you continue to think about that issue?
Well, again, I think, in some ways being a classical musician is the same. You have this identity where we're all supposed to be welcome and,
right.
authored, and then, but you're seen as different and you're treated as such. I grew up in the church, and gospel music was something very personal to me. And for years I had to hide because I was very told, either directly or indirectly, that all of who I am was not welcome. And really, I feel like in some of those most painful times, it was the music that kind of kept me. It might not, no one might have known, my struggle, but the songs of struggle and kind of turmoil and finding grace, like I took that in and I found it most personally through music. And so I think, thank God, no pun intended.
Yeah.
For music.
Thank goddess.
Yes, right. For the opportunity to really be able to connect to my faith in a musical way. I think that's what kept me when people failed. Music persisted, and so I think that kind of was a gracious part of that experience. But I do think we, as a Black people, need to talk about, especially as so many of us, in terms of queer individuals, are leading the church in these musical spaces. So it's like, we're there. But I do think it, in some places still it's a little behind the grain. And so if we really want all of us to be involved in the fight for all of us, then we all need to feel that we are welcome.
Yeah. Well, all of these things, the musical foundation, the struggles, and everything in between coming all together, and we have tonality. I wonder if you can speak to a little bit of the birth of tonality. How did this come about?
Yeah, so there are obviously specific situations, but then there's just, again, the general scope of things that we've seen as a classical musician, coming from a gospel background and then interacting with gospel music, African American spirituals in classical settings. I realized that, I was expected, especially in my graduate degrees, to know exactly how Bach tied his shoelaces or the angle of the sun.
Right.
When he would write certain pieces, and let alone, we wouldn't, on the other hand, we wouldn't even talk about the composers of Black pieces, composers of these genres. These are the pieces of fun.
The concert closers.
Yes, right. When you want to wake people up from the other choices you've made. And I feel like the same type of intention and respect toward Western European cultures was very much shown, I think, probably indirectly, how we value people. People, their cultures, their values, their expressions, that's in the music. And so if you respect the music and you respect the performance practice and the history, then you show people that they are welcome and they're validated. And if you don't do that, then you show other messages. But anyways, in 2016, I saw Conspirare do Considering Matthew Shepard, a powerful piece. And I remember watching it and being so moved, but really it was the conversations after, listening to people talking about, LGBTQ issues, talking about Matthew Shepard, talking about if that piece should be performed and if these are issues that should be in the space. But to me, it just got people talking. And that was always important. And so someone asked me if, what I wanted to do when I finished the doctorate. And I said, eventually when I'm 70 years old and I've made it, I want to start a professional choir. And then he asked me, well, what would make your choir different? I was thinking that's not my concern. I just want a good choir. But then, thinking about my experiences and some of the things I was talking about earlier, I said, I think we have an opportunity to really put the intention and respect toward various genres and diversity, to put that at the forefront, as opposed to just hoping that it happens in a system that does not necessarily support that happening. And so that was kind of how we started, and that's where the name comes from. Really trying to come up with a diverse spectrum of singers in terms of racial and ethnic diversity, but also an equitable space in terms of how we value and interpret and go about learning how to perform these pieces well.
Yeah. I'm reading from your website here. It says Tonality is best known for creating choral concerts that focus on issues rarely presented in choral music. I find this really fascinating because, again, as we were sort of speaking to earlier, the human voice has been used to tell the story of so much pain and so much struggle and so much triumph. I'm thinking about the spiritual. I'm thinking about the music that we put out today. I mean, when we talk about issues rarely presented in choral music, the story has been told, but I feel like it's just the spaces in which the stories are or aren't told is actually the issue.
And when the songs are sung, the stories aren't told. And I think we especially see that in African American spirituals.
Okay.
Like these are songs that are created by people who were bought and sold and owned by other humans who were separated from their families. We don't talk about those when we talk about spirituals. We talk about clapping and about
that's a good point.
A lot of positive emotion. And it's like, sure, there's joy in the midst of an unthinkable environment to live in, to survive in. And so I think if you can do these songs and totally dismiss that, it's dangerous because you're not seeing the whole story. You're not seeing the whole experience of the people. But, I think more specifically, issues of immigration, refugee status, sexual assault, reproductive rights. These are the issues that we rarely see presented in classical choral concerts. And that was kind of where tonality, we started off being about diversity, but then kind of realized in the climate that we were in 2016 with the national election and the like, that we could do more than just be diverse, but we can really use our diversity to speak to issues that might be seen as taboo, but also to bring voice to the most vulnerable and people who need to be uplifted and put in the forefront as well.
How do you make sure that you stay uplifted in some way, focusing so much of your artistic energy on these issues that aren't easy to deal with and to think about, much less to perform and to raise awareness around?
Well, it's funny. I have a hard time doing shallow conversations anyway. So this is like the world I do. But I find the more we talk about these things, yes, they are hard and they're heavy, but I think they're heavier because people haven't been able to talk about them. And I find that as we talk about these issues and more people feel open to share their story, it is a release. And I think it allows more people to be brought in, that type of vulnerability and community support as people tell their stories or we sing about something after someone's talked about it. There's a lot, even in the midst of pain and, difficult situations, I think there's a lot of positivity to be had there because people get to finally be all of themselves. Sometimes it's heavy, but I think that's also relieving. But also I think too, in the type of music we do, yes, we're singing about some heavy subjects, but there are cool pieces that are written about these things or pieces that we get to commission. And the kind of contemporary a cappella style, the R&B stuff that we get to do, I think the music gets to show the plethora of emotions, and it's not all dark and dreary, but it can have a beat, and it can have a rhythm. And so to really get to enjoy the art around these issues is also kind of another way we get to bring in energy.
Yeah, and the community, I'm sure as well, the community of musicians. Who are the members of Tonality? How do you find a whole choir worth of people interested in diving into this work?
Well, after last year, that was not hard at all.
Oh, sure.
It was difficult actually choosing who we were going to make the group. Every year we've done auditions and we've had more of an increase, but certainly again, in this past year with the work that we've done and as more people have learned about tonality, and I think as more artists are trying to find ways to use their art to bring voice to some of these issues, there's this choir that's doing that. And so we were able to get a lot of, different people asking questions about how they can get involved. But yeah, Tonality, it's, professional singers in Los Angeles who, again, are coming from a lot of backgrounds, different expertise in terms of musical styles, who are interested and want to have conversations around these issues and feel like they have the space and the energy and the time to really devote their gifts to really kind of helping enhance this conversation.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I want to get more into this, the challenge of selecting members, because, there's as you said, there's so many folks want to dive into this work, but we're also dealing with the ideas of gatekeeping and maintaining a sort of so-called excellence, in music that has kept so many people out. I mean, how do you address that specific part of it?
In a couple of ways. So first of all, a part of Tonality's audition process is an interview. And so, and I'm just saying this, for all of our friends out there, for anything that you interview or read or, you're applying for, please make sure you read about. It's really interesting how many people come to Tonality and, we'll ask them what brings you to this group. And they'll say, oh, the lovely singing, and have kind of no thoughts or words around what we're singing. Now, it would take you 2 seconds on the website to see that this is a group that focuses on specific things. So that's one part, really making sure that the heart is there. It's exciting music, it's new music, but we are really diving into difficult topics. And then in our audition process, we have a couple of ways, this excellence word, which, yes, in our field should really just be retired. But there's also the practicality of, we have 4 rehearsals. We don't have a lot of rehearsals before each concert, and the music that we choose is difficult.
Yeah.
And so we have a sight reading component, which of course can be its own barrier because of backgrounds and how people learn. And then we also do this kind of like music note memory section. It helps those who have learned by rote learning.
Okay.
For instance, who come from the gospel background, where you're not looking at music, someone's playing you a part and you sing it back. And so having either one of those skills lets us know that you can either learn or quickly pick up the music beforehand, which is important because I do think, like you said, the gatekeeping and this type of work has to be inclusive, or it's not really effective.
I want to focus in on one piece of music. When folks go to Tonality's website, a performance of 3 Strikes is what you see first, what they'll see first. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about this piece of music, the performance of it, the rehearsal process, everything surrounding this media that we see front and center on the website.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3 to Lyfe was written. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But we were going to perform it in March of 2020. And that concert was canceled 2 days before it happened because of COVID.
Everybody had plans in March, didn't they?
Yes. And we had them too. We were going to do a whole concert on criminal justice. And a friend of mine, Roman Gianarthur, recommended that I watch 13th, the documentary on Netflix. And that was the first time I had learned about the 3 Strikes Law. And just thinking, it is insane to me that not for everyone, for certain people in this country, the issues and the mistakes that they made when they were younger can affect their sentence in a current state, whether that sentence is violent or not, depending on the state that you're in. And thank goodness not all of us are judged by the mistakes that we made when we were younger.
Right.
I remember thinking, this law is insane, and maybe more people know about it, but I certainly didn't. So how do we let people know, aside from just yelling about it? A song needs to be created. And since there wasn't one, I decided to take a stab at it. So this is my first composition. But it actually wasn't finished at the time of the concert.
Oh, so, wow.
Yes. So, there is some grace in COVID times. And so through the year, I worked on it, and we finally recorded it. And at that time, we were really able to discuss and talk about, leading up to the concert and throughout, the past couple of months, what it means to really delve into the stories that are talked about. A story that was made up in the song, but that story is based on real facts,
right?
In real cases. And to have conversations, and really to also involve the deaf community, as we have ASL interpreters as well. And again, when we talk about intersectionality, there are certain things that, I, as a musician, certainly do not know about the deaf and hard of hearing community, but the Black experience is the Black experience. And from 100 feet away, whether I'm hearing or not, I'm Black first.
Yeah.
And so being able to kind of share this story and to bring to light, again, where I think I'm finding that more and more people were also unaware of this law. And just really makes people take a second look at, our system and just how reformative it is and the changes that we need to make, especially when people of color are disproportionately affected by these laws that are in place.
When we talk about performing arts ensembles and the members in them, so many of us who came up through music, went to music school and all that stuff, we don't have the same levels of proximity to these issues that some of our other Black and brown sisters and brothers have. How do you deal with the idea of what Tonality is doing being performative to that point, no real proximity, or maybe there is some proximity within the group and members of the group?
Yeah, I don't think we have covered a single subject that we have not had a very personal connections within the group. And so I feel that luckily that has been, a process, really talking to the singers. All of our rehearsal processes, again, which is why it's so important to learn the music quickly, they all involve conversations around the issues. And we are always finding that, again, the more we talk, the more we have space to find that time. I'm always kind of startled every time of how many singers, not just who, but just how many have a real close connection and proximity to these things. And so we're not, I find, again, just because of diversity and the experiences that we have, we're never kind of reaching out there to find stories and trying to chase news. It's what are we dealing with in our group? And then as we open up and talk about these things and present concerts on these things, you realize those issues out there are very much centered in our group. And I think too, to also make sure it's not performative, the big thing that I think we do that I find meaningful, we do our job as artists. Our job is to help move emotions and to inspire and to encourage and maybe to disrupt. But with those emotions and with that inspiration or discomfort or frustration, what do people do? And I think it would have been a missed opportunity if we did not do the work to really reach out to the organizations who are actively involved. So if you see a concert about gun violence, and maybe many of our audience members might not have ever felt so close, except when you're hearing this story and then feeling this song. What do I do with that? Well, you don't have to leave the space. You don't have to do some research. There's literally a booth with someone there who can help you get involved and more aware and knowledgeable about the ways to either vote or support or donate, so that those issues, maybe when you walked into the space, they might not have seemed like they were yours. They were always yours. And now and now you have ways to get involved. And so that's, I think, a way that we try to make sure that our concerts are active and not just about the performance.
Yeah. Tonality is, of course, just one of the many things that you do, one of the things that keeps you busy. I wonder if the work that you do with Tonality has an impact on your other work. Do you go into a non-Tonality space and, have to deal with folks that see you as this political activist person, even though that's not what you're there specifically for? Is there sort of a crossover there or cross-pollination?
Yeah, it's funny. Yes, I think there is a little bit. I think people know that, and especially because I put this forth, that in spaces where there can be change and there need to be perspectives brought, that I will bring them. But I do feel like there's freedom for me to just do pieces. I don't think that it has been lost that I do have some a lot of years in school, if not some skills in conducting. And so I have been able, just to enjoy. But I will say, actually, before anyone brings that to me, I tend to bring that to my.
You started.
Yeah. I was like, I think these are conversations to have. And even in kind of the pieces that are not so on the nose about social justice, they're about stories. Stories represent people. And I think it gives us an opportunity to, again, to just say, especially as choral musicians who sing words, and therefore we express thoughts and emotions and feelings about how people experience life.
Yeah.
Those are always conversations about how we can be better to community members, no matter what the conversation is. And so I think that just always allows an open door to make also, I think, to bring to students, with whom I work a lot, a deeper connection with the pieces that they're doing. And probably some pieces that they might not have felt were as relevant to them until we start to have these conversations. And it's like, oh, I can draw a relation to that story that didn't seem like it was mine. And now this piece is mine in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah. And I actually want to close out with a student-based question. But before I do that, how can folks get more information on Tonality, to check out some of the music and maybe even some upcoming performances?
Yes. We just came up with an album, America Will Be, which 1, 2, 3 to Life is on. You can find that on our website, Our Tonality, OURtonality.org. You can also find our concert called America Will Be, and our whole season. That's also on our website. So we will be having in-person, all vaxxed, all masked concerts. And also every concert will have ASL interpretation. So all of those events are online as well. And our albums and things are on all the listening platforms.
There are so many teachers who have the responsibility of making sure that that entry point is one that is equitable and one that speaks to the experiences of these kids. I imagine that many of these same teachers will say, well, diving into issues like the 3-strike rule is just a little difficult for me and maybe inappropriate for me to introduce to a 5th or 6th grade choir. What are your words to those folks? What words of encouragement or otherwise do you have for some of these music teachers at this entry point when it comes to making sure that this is a conversation that is normalized in choral spaces and not specialized, I'll say, in specific corners of the choral spaces?
Yeah, I'll stick with encouragement. That's always a nice place to stay.
Yeah.
I think your students are not too young to experience these issues. We have seen, young students, young kids of color, young kids in general deal with issues of so many injustices, but life happens.
Yeah.
Trauma happens, violence happens. And I think when those things are bottled up and they're not able to be expressed, that's when we start to see real problems. And so really, music allows for people to be able to, I think, again, to express and to deal with emotionally, because, the arts and music and choral music help to express and convey emotions. I think it allows people to really be able to be in a space where that can be more open. And that is an opportunity for teachers to take the music. And even if you delve lightly or not at all, to sing about someone who, to sing Mom, I'm Going to College, and to say this is from a person who was shot and killed by police. That starts questions. It just opens up the door, if that music was, if that story was valued enough to be put to music, and you can bring that to your classroom, I think that starts to bring about conversations. Of course, every teacher gets to gauge their classroom, their environment. But I think maybe even more than just kind of standing up and speaking about the issue, really allowing the music to drive the conversation allows a lot more, I think, again, flexibility and breadth of the experiences that you can depict.
America Will Be from their latest album, also titled America Will Be. You can buy and stream that wherever you listen to your music. Huge shout out and thank you to Dr. Blake and to everyone over at Tonality for everything you're doing. All right, it's time for us to get into the final movement, the TRILLOQUY movement. We're going to listen to a trill from the repertoire as we have been doing. This week, I'm going to put on some music. Another one of the pieces that I heard at the Juilliard performance when I was in New York. This is a solo viola piece by a French composer named Philippe Hersant, his Pavane for solo viola. Let's take a listen to this. You know, maybe folks in the guitar world don't have to think about this idea so often, but certainly as a wind player, and I would say for string players as well, the idea of it being your instrument and the air conditioner, you know, that's on, for a real solo piece, something unaccompanied. There's even a more difficulty in making sure that the music and the sound and the style comes through because you don't have any help. It's just you.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I think pieces like that are a great exercise in making sure that we can create everything we can just with our single instrument. So shout out to the composer Philippe Hersant for that really incredible piece of music. All right, we're here in the final movement. We're running late. We're not going to spend too much time this week, but there was a story that came across my eyes that we had to speak to, that I felt like I needed to speak to. I'm reading here from blackenterprise.com. The headline is Louisiana State Trooper fired for speaking out on death of a black man after violent arrest. Let me read just a little bit of this. After 7 years as a Louisiana State Trooper, Carl Cavalier says he is being terminated for publicly addressing a violent 2019 arrest by his department, which resulted in one man's death. According to NBC News, Cavalier has been on paid leave since August, shortly after speaking to a local news station about the arrest and death of Ronald Green, after originally reporting that Green had been injured in a car accident during a high-speed chase. The Louisiana State Police later released video footage that showed him being stunned, dragged from his car, and beaten by 3 troopers. Okay. This is my first question, Scott. Do you think this is an isolated event? Are the cops down in Louisiana particularly bad, or is this an example of how the police industrial complex is an oppressive force against black folk, all folks, but especially black folks here in America?
It is not isolated. Next question.
Is this police specific? Okay. We have somebody getting fired for doing the right thing within a system, okay, and we happen to be talking about the field of police work, state troopers. Let's back up from that specific field. Do you think that getting fired for doing something right, and let's not even talk about me, getting fired for doing something right is something that is specific to police force work?
No.
Okay. When I read this article, first of all, shout out to Mr. Cavalier for doing the right thing, for really putting it on the line, for doing what's right. When folks talk about the good police officer, the idea of the good police officer, I push back because where are they? Where are they when all of these people are getting killed and these police stations, these precincts, these institutions are doing everything they can to put it under the rug, to bury the real story for the sake of maintaining that system? I see very few stories like this, and while it's a shame that he's being fired, I hope that he understands the system that he was a part of and has a way moving forward to help dismantle that system. Okay, so again, as we back up from the picture, I'm thinking about all of the conservatories. I'm thinking about all of the orchestras that have people in them, decision makers that may not be, covering up a death, something that serious, but are going along with all white or predominantly white, predominantly European programming, seasons, and not saying anything or doing anything. So how can we how can we talk about, and I know I've been railing on, the impossibility of change from the inside, but I see this as an example of the scarcity, maybe even the impossibility of doing that, because change from the inside requires doing something that is against the rules, against the grain, which will get people fired, dismissed, punished, whatever. So you don't, because you have to hold on to that paycheck and all of those things. Yes, capitalism is oppressing all of us in different ways, but we can't allege to be on the right side of the story, the right side of history, if we're saying nothing. And I'm so glad that this story is coming out, because it proves that this is not only an issue in police force work, all of these so-called good cops turning a blind eye when they're trying to bury a story, trying to bury the truth. I think that's one part of the discussion. If we back up, I think we can have that discussion about all of these institutions and what isn't being done from the inside.
Whenever somebody comes at you and said, well, it's just a few bad apples, ask them if they know the rest of that cliche.
It's a bad tree. It's a bad fucked up tree is what it is. And I understand that there are some individuals who are, we've spoken to this on TRILLOQUY before, breaking down the idea of an objectively good or bad person. That's a deeper conversation that we have time for today. But, again, this is just an example of just how that complex, that industrial complex is built to work. They flat foot lied to
Right,
that man's
right.
family, lied
Yep.
and got caught. Okay. Everybody knows the name George Floyd now. The original police report, I cannot repeat this enough. The original police report mentioned nothing about Derek Chauvin's knee on that man's neck, not one thing. So if it weren't for that video footage, that story would have been
Right.
completely different, and you would have had a sea of police officers covering up that story and not telling the truth, because they would be afraid to lose their job. So they're just doing the whole, if you can't beat them, join them sort of thing. Let's surround Mr. Cavalier. I hope he finds a different line of work to be in, a different institution to put himself in, because you see the kind of institution that you have dedicated this much of your life to. So it's time to make a change. I hope everyone will go and read and learn more about this story and understand more of what you can do to press against the grain, to loop back around in closing, to fire shut up in my bones, a line that was repeated throughout the opera, in a literal way and a figurative way, is you got to disturb the earth to make something grow. You have to till that ground. You have to tear it up. And that might be uncomfortable for the ground. That might be uncomfortable for the earth, but that's the only way for things to grow. So if we're uncomfortable doing something like proverbially disturbing the earth, how can we change the systems, the institutions whose foundations are built on top of that earth? How can we impact and change the individuals who walk on that earth if we don't want to make things uncomfortable, if we don't want to shake the table, so to speak, all of those things? We have to really learn. This is an example, from this police department down in Louisiana, but it definitely applies to the arts, because many of you who are alleging to be changing from the inside, your principal goal, your principal job is to maintain your position in those institutions, which means that you're following their rules and being a part of the problems that they are perpetuating in the arts. There's a lot of people that get mad at me when I talk about that, and I'm not just saying full stop that change can't happen from the inside. I'm just saying that change from the inside requires things that most people in the inside are unwilling to do for the sake of maintaining their position on the inside. Does that make sense? You don't have to agree or disagree or whatever, but do you hear what I'm saying?
I hear you.
Okay. So I hope more of you will think about that as we move forward. Thank you so much for listening. Here's to being a disturbance to the field. See y'all next week.